It's Sunday, April the 1st, 2018, and this is Wes Fryer with a narrated sermon sketch note for our Easter service today at church. Today's sermon was shared by Eric Lavrance, and the title of it was Do Not Be Afraid, Go and Tell. The verses that the sermon was based on were from Matthew 28. Eric started today with the story of a hermit crab that they had at their house, which actually had molted and wasn't dead, and that made for a funny story. But he talked about how, obviously the life or the death of a hermit crab doesn't change our lives. What should change our lives is the history of Jesus' resurrection. He reminded us that thousands of people have seen and saw Jesus crucified and alive again, and that the resurrection of Jesus truly is the cornerstone of our faith as Christians. He went on to talk about this whole verse of do not be afraid, and how fear is all over the story of Jesus in the last days, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, and right up until the resurrection. And it's all over our lives as well. And it's not just fear of death, although that is certainly part of the fear. It's also a fear of failure and a fear of so many other things. And so he reminded us that according to the Bible, fear comes from a separation from God. Back in Genesis, we read the stories of Adam and Eve, and we read about Adam and Eve not being naked and ashamed, but being naked and afraid. And so when we think about the fears that we have, many times those do come when we're separated from God and we're not close to God. Eric asked if we can afford not to be afraid, to give up what the world tells us to do, and instead to rely on the good news that we learn in the Gospels. He pointed out how Stephen Hawking, who recently passed away, painted a really bleak picture of end times, the darkness that would just cover the earth, and the ways in which, I guess, planetary evolution would just take effect, and we're all going to fade into nothing. And really that highlights for me the fact that within the realm of science we don't find hope, and we don't find transcendental understanding. And that's one of the important reasons why God sent Jesus to the world, and why we have the Bible and God's Word, is to be able to understand that. So we learn in Colossians 1:15 through 17 that everything was created through Him and for Him, and what good news that is in terms of understanding the earth and creation. We also talked about the biggest risk might be, living like Jesus isn't real today, and that is certainly a key idea, that we talk about at Easter and other times, is the reality of God. Eric talked about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that he was able to visit today, and how it's over the spot where many people believe the tomb of Jesus was. And there's several different places that people talk about maybe that tomb being, but of course, it's not there. The reality is, Jesus is alive today when we call on Him and when we call on His name. And so our challenge and our opportunity is to ask and receive. And so no matter how bleak the world seems, no matter how dark our valley might be, Jesus is there. And so just as Jesus exhorted the women to not be afraid, we have the same exhortation today, to not be afraid, to cast our eyes upon Jesus, and to receive Him as He comes to assist us in our hour of need.